The rusty sword. The wind was cold and the ruins were silent. Broken machines lay scattered across the ground, their metal bodies half buried in sand and dust. Once, this place had been a battlefield. Now, it was nothing more than a graveyard. Young man named Cale walked carefully through the wreckage. His boots crunched on broken glass and stone. He was not a soldier, not a warrior, just a scavenger. Every day he searched old ruins for pieces of metal, wires, or forgotten machines. He sold them in the market for a few coins, just enough to buy food and keep a roof over his head. That day felt no different. He carried a small bag, already heavy with scraps of copper and steel, but something kept pulling him deeper into the ruins, into a place he had never explored before. The air grew still. The ruins here looked older than the rest, as if time itself had forgotten them. Strange carvings covered the walls, symbols Cale did not understand. He touched the stone, and it was cold, colder than the wind around him. Then his eyes caught it, a shape, half buried in the dirt sticking out from the ground like the bone of some ancient beast. He knelt down and brushed away the dust with his hands. His heart skipped a beat. It was a sword, not a shiny, polished weapon, but an old, broken thing. The blade was rusty, the handle wrapped in torn leather. It looked worthless, the kind of thing even the junk dealers would laugh at. And yet, there was something strange about it. Even through the rust, the blade gave off a faint glow, like a star, dying, but not yet dead. Cale reached out, his fingers trembling. He told himself it was just metal, just another scrap to sell. But deep inside, something whispered, "Take it." The moment his hand closed around the hilt, the ground shook. A deep hum filled the air, like a hidden engine roaring back to life after centuries of silence. The carvings on the walls lit up, glowing with the same faint light as the sword. Cale stumbled back, dropping his bag. His heart pounded. The sword felt heavy, but not from its weight. It was heavy with something else. Something alive. Across the galaxy, in places Cale had never heard of, alarms began to ring. Old machines, long silent, powered on again. Holograms flickered in empty halls. Hidden satellites sent signals into space. The Empire, thought lost to history, was stirring awake, and it all began with Cale lifting that rusty sword. But Cale did not know any of this. He only knew that his hand was shaking and his breath was fast. He wanted to drop the sword, but his fingers refused to let go. The leather grip grew warm against his palm, almost comforting, almost like the sword wanted him to hold it. "What are you?" Cale whispered. No answer came, but the air felt heavier, like a storm was about to break. He looked around nervously, but the ruins were silent again. The glow faded, leaving only the rusty blade in his hand. He tried to laugh. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he imagined everything. It was just an old sword, nothing more. He shoved it into his bag and stood up, forcing himself to leave before the ruins swallowed him too. But as he walked away, a shadow moved in the distance. Someone had been watching him. A small device blinked red, recording everything. The signal was sent far away, across stars, to people who had waited a long time for this moment. "The Emperor has returned," a voice whispered from the other side of the galaxy. Cale reached the edge of the ruins by sunset. The orange sky burned with fading light and the cold wind rose again. He looked back once at the silent graveyard of machines. He had no idea that his life had changed forever. He thought tomorrow would be the same. Wake up, search, sell, eat, sleep. He did not know that ships were already flying toward his world. Tikeru. Rusty sword rested in his bag, quiet now but waiting, always waiting. And soon Cale would learn that sometimes the most broken things hide the greatest power. The first hunt night fell heavy on the ruins. The markets had closed and the streets of the outpost were dark, lit only by flickering neon signs and broken lamps. Cale sat in his small room, staring at the rusty sword lying on his table. It had not left his mind since the moment he touched it. He had tried to eat, but the food turned cold. He had tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of something. Crowds shouting, great ships flying through burning skies, a throne made of silver and fire. The visions vanished as quickly as they came, leaving him sweating and shaking. He muttered to himself, "It's just junk, just old metal." But the sword's faint glow, almost invisible in the dark, disagreed. Outside, the night was not silent. Shadows moved across the rooftops, men in black armor that shimmered against the starlight. They carried strange weapons and their helmets covered their faces. They moved like predators, careful and quiet. They were not from Cale's world. They had come for the sword. Cale woke suddenly when his door creaked. He sat up, heart racing. He thought it was the wind, but then he saw the outline of a man standing inside his room. The figure stepped forward, and the light of the neon outside caught the shine of steel. Cale's body froze. The intruder raised his weapon, a blade humming with blue energy. But before Cale could scream, the rusty sword on his table moved. On its own. It slid across the wood, leaping into Kyle's hand. The moment his fingers wrapped around the hilt, time seemed to slow. The enemy swung, but Cale raised the sword without thinking. The two blades clashed, sparks exploding in the dark. The sound was deafening. Cale's arms should have broken under. The strike, but the sword held firm. The intruder stumbled back, surprised. Cale, gasping, realized his hands were glowing faintly, like the sword was pouring something into him. Strength, speed, fire. Another shadow appeared at the window, then another at the door. Cale's room filled with hunters, silent and merciless. He wanted to drop the sword. He wanted to run. But the sword did not let him. It pulled his body forward, swinging with deadly precision. Kyle was no fighter, but every move felt natural, as if he had trained for years. The blade cut through the air, blocking shots of burning plasma, turning aside blades of light. Sparks danced in the shadows. His attackers were strong, but the sword was stronger. By the time it was over, Cale was standing in the middle of his ruined room, chest heaving, surrounded by broken walls and smoking weapons. His attackers had fled into the night, but not all of them escaped. One lay still on the floor, his armor cracked open. Cale dropped the sword, trembling. His hands shook, his knees gave out, and he nearly collapsed. He stared at the fallen intruder, fear boiling in his stomach. He pulled off the man's helmet with shaking fingers. The face underneath was pale, almost human, but the eyes glowed with a strange yellow light. It was not a man. Not anymore. Cale stumbled back. What are you?" The creature twitched once and then stilled. Before Cale could think, the sword whispered in his mind. Not words, not exactly, but feelings, warnings, danger. He felt it pulling his attention outside, beyond the walls to the sky. He ran to the window, and there he saw them. Dark ships hovering above the outpost, their shapes cutting across the stars like shadows of monsters. Lights flashed as more figures dropped from the sky, hunters pouring down into the town. They weren't here for anyone else. They were here for him. Kyle grabbed the sword and ran into the night. The streets were chaos. People screamed and scattered as armored hunters stormed through the market, smashing stalls, tearing down doors. They carried strange devices, scanning, searching. "Find the blade," one of them roared, his voice mechanical. Cale's blood ran cold. They were after the sword. They were after him. He darted into an alley, his boots splashing in puddles. The rusty sword pulsed in his grip, its glow faint but steady like a heartbeat. He whispered, "Why me? Why did you choose me?" No answer came. Only the sound of soldiers closing in. He pressed himself against a wall, holding his breath as two hunters passed by. Their weapons crackled with energy, humming in the silence. For a moment, Kyle thought he was safe. Then the sword's glow brightened. "Phew!" Hunters turned. "There!" one shouted. Cale bolted. The alley exploded behind him as plasma shots struck the wall, blasting stone into dust. He ran through the twisting streets, past terrified faces, past burning shops. His lungs screamed, his legs shook, but the sword dragged him forward like it knew the way. Finally, he reached the old ruins again, the place where he had found the sword. The hunters followed. The chase ended in the heart of the ruins, under the shadow of a broken tower. Cale tripped and fell, the sword clattering beside him. The hunters surrounded him, their weapons raised. One of them stepped forward. His armor was blacker than the rest, his mask carved with strange markings. He spoke with a deep, echoing voice. "The lost bloodline has returned. The Emperor lives." Cale's mouth went dry. I'm not anyone. You've got the wrong person." But the masked leader shook his head slowly. "The sword does not lie. You carry the mark of the throne. And now, you die." He raised his weapon to strike. Cale crawled back, panic rising in his chest. He reached for the sword, but it slid away from his hand. For the first time, it did not obey. The leader's blade came down, and suddenly, a burst of light filled the ruins. The rusty sword shot upward on its own, spinning through the air. It glowed brighter than ever before, fire and lightning wrapping around its blade. The hunters stumbled back, shielding their eyes. Cale's hand lifted, and the sword flew straight into his grip. Power surged through him like a storm. His fear vanished, replaced by something else. Something ancient. Something fierce. The hunters hesitated. For the first time, they looked afraid. Cale stood tall, the rusty sword burning in his hand like a star reborn. And in that moment, the first hunt truly began. The hidden truth. The ruins were silent again. Smoke drifted in the night air, carrying the scent of scorched stone. Cale stood with the rusty sword glowing in his hand, his chest heaving. The hunters were gone, either dead or scattered, but their leader's words still echoed in his head. "The Emperor lives." Cale stared at the blade, his mind racing. His whole body shook, not from the cold, but from something deeper. Fear. This sword, this cursed piece of metal, had dragged him into a storm he never asked for. He turned and ran. By morning, the outpost looked broken. Shops had burned, doors smashed in, and people whispered on the streets. Everyone was asking the same question. Who were those hunters? Why were they here? Cale kept his head down, the sword hidden in a bag. He didn't answer anyone. He slipped into the market, bought food with trembling hands, and rushed away before anyone noticed him. But whispers followed him. Faces turned. Eyes lingered. They knew something. Or maybe they just suspected. Either way, Cale felt the weight of the entire galaxy pressing down on his shoulders. That night, when he finally returned to his small home, someone was waiting for him. An old woman sat in his chair, her hood pulled, low over her face. She did not move when Cale opened the door. Her voice was soft, cracked with age, but steady. "You've awakened it." Cale froze, his hand tightening on the bag. Who are you?" The woman raised her head, and Cale saw her eyes. They were not ordinary eyes. They glowed faintly with silver light, like two moons staring straight through him. "You carry the sword," she said. "The sword of ashen flame. Do you even know what that means, boy?" Cale's throat went dry. "It's just a weapon. I found it in the ruins." The woman shook her head slowly. "No one finds the sword. The sword chooses." Cale laughed nervously, though his voice cracked. "Then it made a mistake." "Does it look like a mistake to you?" she whispered. Before Cale could answer, she raised her hand, and suddenly the air shimmered. The walls of his small room vanished, replaced by a vision. Cale staggered back, his eyes wide. He stood in a vast hall filled with fire and banners, towering statues of kings and queens. Soldiers in shining armor knelt before a silver throne, their voices chanting. And on the throne sat a man holding the very same rusty sword, though in the vision it was bright and alive, glowing like the sun. Cale's heart hammered. He knew that face. He didn't know how, but he knew it. The man on the throne looked just like him. The vision faded. The room returned. Cale gasped for breath, sweat dripping from his forehead. What was that?" he demanded. The old woman's silver eyes did not blink. That was your bloodline. You are no scavenger, Kale. You are the heir of the last emperor, the child hidden when the empire fell. And the sword you carry is the proof. The galaxy has waited for you. Kale's chest tightened. His whole life, he had been nothing. Just a boy who dug through ruins to survive. And now this stranger was calling him Emperor? No, he said, shaking his head. You're wrong. I'm no one. Just leave me alone. But the woman leaned forward. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the air. Do you think the hunters came for no one? Do you think ships crossed the stars for a poor boy in the dust? No, Kale. They came because you are someone. Because the throne is waiting. And because others, powerful, merciless men, want it for themselves. Kale clenched, his fists. I don't want a throne. I don't want any of this. The woman's eyes softened, but only slightly. Destiny does not ask what you want. It only asks what you will do when it finds you. That night, Kyle couldn't sleep. The old woman's words gnawed at his mind. He stared at the sword, lying beside him on the floor. Its glow was faint but steady, like it was listening. Are you really mine? He whispered. The sword pulsed, just once. Kale turned away. The next day, Kale thought of leaving. He thought of taking the sword, throwing it into the deepest canyon he could find and disappearing into the wastes. But when he stepped outside, he saw them. The hunters were back, dozens this time, marching through the streets in black armor. The people of the outpost scattered like birds. The hunters searched every house, every stall, their voices booming. Bring us the boy. Bring us the sword. Kale's blood froze. They weren't just hunting quietly anymore. They were tearing the town apart. And then, Kale's worst fear came true. One of the hunters grabbed a child from the crowd, lifting him by the collar. The boy screamed, kicking. The leader's mask turned, his voice like thunder. Bring us the sword, or the child dies. Kale's hands shook, his chest burned. He wanted to hide, to run. But the sword glowed brighter, pulsing with heat, demanding an answer. Kale stepped out of the shadows. The crowd gasped. The hunters turned, and the rusty sword flew into Kale's grip, its light blazing like fire. The fight was chaos. Plasma shots streaked through the air. Walls crumbled. Fire spread. Kyle moved faster than he ever had before. The sword guided his strikes, cutting through weapons, deflecting blasts. Every time he thought he would fall, the blade carried him forward. But this time something was different. Every clash, every strike brought more flashes in his head. Memories not his own. He saw soldiers marching, worlds burning, people bowing before a throne. He saw betrayal, blood, the fall of the empire. He saw a woman carrying a baby, hiding him away, whispering words of promise. The visions were pieces of a puzzle, and deep down, Kale knew who that baby was. Him. By the time the battle ended, the hunters were gone again, their leader wounded but alive, fleeing into the night. The outpost lay in ruins, but the people stared at Kale with new eyes. They didn't see a scavenger anymore. They saw something else. The old woman appeared again, stepping out from the smoke. She looked at Kale, her silver eyes steady. Now you understand, she said. Kale swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the sword. I understand. That my life is over. No, she whispered. Your life has just begun. And with that, she handed him a small device glowing with old energy. Follow this, she said. It will lead you to the truth, to allies, to answers, and to your throne. Kyle stared at the device, then at the sword, then at the ruined outpost around him. His heart was heavy. He didn't want this destiny, but he also couldn't ignore it anymore. The galaxy knew him now. The hunters knew him. And soon, everyone would. Kyle closed his eyes. For the first time, he felt the weight of the crown he had never wanted, and far above, in the darkness of space, more ships were already coming. Betrayal in the shadows. The desert winds howled across the outpost ruins. Smoke still rose from shattered homes, and the people whispered in fear. The hunters had been driven away, but everyone knew they would return. Cale sat alone in the remains of an old workshop, the rusty sword glowing faintly at his side. The old woman's words replayed in his mind. Your bloodline lives. You are the heir. The galaxy has waited for you. He clenched his fists. He didn't want to be an heir. He didn't want power. All he wanted was a simple life. But now, even that had been stolen from him. That evening, a familiar voice broke through his storm of thoughts. Cale? He turned sharply. It was Darren, his closest friend since childhood. A broad-shouldered man with quick hands and a grin that usually disarmed any trouble. Darren had scavenged beside him for years, and when the markets grew cruel, they had split bread together. Cale almost smiled in relief. Darren, you made it out alive. Barely, Darren said, stepping into the workshop. His clothes were torn. A cut ran down his cheek. He glanced at the sword on the table and his smile faltered. So it's true. You really have it. Cale shifted uncomfortably. I don't even know what it is. Darren closed the door behind him, lowering his voice. Cale, people are saying you fought off an army, that the sword moves like it's alive, that it chose you. Cale swallowed. I didn't choose it, it just happened. Darren stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. Whatever this is, it's too big, too dangerous. You need help. You can't fight the galaxy alone. For a moment, Kyle felt hope. Maybe he didn't have to face this nightmare by himself. Will you help me? Darren smiled faintly, but there was something in his eyes Kyle couldn't quite read. Always, brother. Always. But that night, as the two of them walked through the outskirts of town, Cale noticed something strange. Darren kept glancing over his shoulder. He walked too fast, too nervous. And when Cale asked where they were going, Darren only said, somewhere safe. Cale's unease grew. The sword pulsed at his side as if it too sensed the lie. Finally, they reached the ruins of an old tower. The place was silent, the air heavy. Cale frowned. Safe? Here? Before Darren could answer, shadows emerged from the darkness. Figures, in black armor, the hunters. Cale's stomach dropped. He spun toward Darren, but the look on his friend's face told him everything. Betrayal. I'm sorry, Cale, Darren said, his voice tight. They offered me more than I could ever dream of. Food, money, safety. You don't understand, these people, they're unstoppable. You can't win. Cale's chest tightened like a blade had pierced it. His voice cracked. You sold me. Out. Darren's jaw clenched. It was the only way. If I didn't bring you, they would have killed us all. This is bigger than you, Cale. Bigger than both of us. Cale's grip on the sword shook. His best friend, the brother he trusted, with his life had handed him over to the very monsters that wanted him dead. The hunters stepped closer, weapons drawn. The leader, the one with the carved mask, pointed a long spear of black steel at Cale. The bloodline ends tonight. The sword leapt into Cale's hand before he even thought about it. Energy surged through his veins, fire roaring in his chest. The hunters charged, their weapons blazing with blue fire. Kyle moved like lightning, the sword guiding his every strike. Sparks exploded as blades clashed. Beams of plasma ricocheted off walls. Cale deflected them, each strike faster, harder, fueled by pain and betrayal, but there were too many. He fought desperately, but the hunters pressed him back. One blasted the ground at his feet, sending him sprawling. The leader raised his spear, ready to pierce his chest. And then, unexpectedly, a shot rang out. One of the hunters fell, smoke rising from a hole in his armor. Kyle turned, shocked. Darren stood there holding a stolen plasma rifle, his face twisted in conflict. Run, Kyle, he shouted. Go! Kyle's mind spun. He wanted to scream, to demand why, to ask if this was just another trick. But there was no time. The hunters roared, closing in. Kyle grabbed the sword and surged to his feet, slashing through the chaos. Darren fired again and again, covering him. Together, they broke through the circle of enemies, running into the darkness. Hours later, they collapsed, in a canyon far outside the outpost. The night sky burned with stars above them. Cale sat with the sword across his lap, his eyes fixed on Darren. His voice was low, cold. "You betrayed me." Darren lowered his head. "I thought I was saving us. I thought I was saving you. But when I saw them raise that spear, I couldn't let them take you, not like that." Cale's chest ached. He wanted to trust him again. He wanted to believe the bond they had wasn't broken. But something inside him whispered, "Once broken, trust never heals the same." "You nearly got me killed," Cale said. His voice was sharp, heavier than steel. "I know." Darren's voice cracked. "And I'll carry that. But if you still want me at your side, I'll fight for you. I swear it." Cale stared at him for a long time. The sword pulsed faintly, in his hand as if weighing Darren's soul. Finally, Cale turned away, the weight of the Empire pressing harder on his shoulders. "This path isn't about fighting for me, Darren. It's about fighting for everyone." Silence hung between them. Far above, in the black void of space, a new figure watched the stars. A man cloaked in crimson armor, his eyes burning with power. He stood on the deck of a massive ship, its size dwarfing the hunter's vessels. "The boy lives," he murmured, watching the flickering signals from the hunters. "The sword burns again." His lips curled into a smile. "Then let him come. Let him rise. I will crush him before he even learns who he is." His voice was like poison, like fire. The false emperor had revealed himself, and Cale's greatest trial had only just begun. Rise of the false emperor. The desert was silent, but Cale's thoughts roared louder than a storm. He sat on the edge of the canyon, the rusty sword glowing faintly across his lap. The memory of betrayal still burned in his chest. Darren slept, nearby, restless even in dreams, and Cale wondered if he could ever truly trust him again. The old woman's silver eyes haunted him too. "You are the heir. The sword chose you." He clenched his fists. He didn't want to be heir to anything, but the galaxy refused to let him stay small. Far away on a world of glass towers and black skies, the false emperor stood before his throne. His name was Malvek. Cloaked in crimson armor, his presence was like a storm wrapped in fire. His voice carried across the great hall where lords, generals, and mercenaries knelt at his feet. "The sword burns again," Malvek declared, his words echoing through the chamber. "The bloodline rises. And with it, rebellion." The lords murmured in unease. Some looked hopeful, others afraid. The return of the true bloodline meant the people might rally. The old empire might awaken again. But Malvek smiled, sharp and cruel. "Do not fear. This pretender will not live long. I will give the galaxy an emperor they can see, an emperor of flesh and fire, an emperor they cannot refuse." He raised his gauntlet, and a hologram bloomed in the air. It was him, seated upon the ancient silver throne, the image altered to make it seem real. Soldiers cheered, citizens wept, worlds began to believe. The galaxy whispered, "The emperor has returned." But it was the wrong one. Meanwhile, Cale and Darren journeyed deeper into the wastes. Guided by the old woman's device, it glowed with strange light, pointing the way through barren canyons and shattered ruins. Days passed in silence, Kyle wrestling with thoughts he could not escape. One night, they found shelter in a collapsed bunker. As Cale cleaned the sword, he asked quietly, "Why me, Darren? Why couldn't the sword choose someone else?" Darren, staring into the fire, said, "Because no one else would carry it. You don't want power. That's why it chose you." Cale frowned. He wasn't sure if that was wisdom or a cruel joke. On the 7th day, they reached the ruins of an ancient city. Towers lay broken, ships long rusted, but deep beneath the stone they found life. A hidden chamber. Inside were people, rebels, refugees, soldiers hiding from Malvek's rule. Their leader, Captain Saren, was a scarred woman with eyes sharp as glass. She eyed Kale suspiciously when he revealed the sword. "So it's true," she muttered. "The heir lives. The galaxy is about to bleed again." Kale bristled. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for any of it." Saren's expression hardened. "No one asks for destiny. But if you truly are who the sword says you are, then you have a choice. Fight, or watch Malvek enslave every world left standing." Kyle hesitated. But before he could answer, the bunker shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. The hunters had found them. The battle in the underground city was chaos. Soldiers poured in, their black armor glowing in the firelight. Kale fought at the front lines, the sword blazing brighter with every strike. Darren covered him with stolen rifles, and Captain Saren rallied her rebels with deadly precision. But the hunters were endless. They pushed deeper and deeper until finally the chamber doors exploded, and a massive figure stepped through. Not just a hunter, a warlord. He was twice the size of a man, his armor crimson and black, his weapon a spear, crackling with burning energy. His voice thundered through the chamber. "By order of Emperor Malvek, the false heir dies tonight." Kyle's stomach twisted. Malvek had already declared himself emperor. The warlord charged, striking with earth-shaking power. Kyle barely blocked, the force throwing him across the chamber. Sparks rained as the rusty sword clashed with the spear, each strike heavier than the last. Kale's arms ached, his body screamed, but the sword poured strength into him, refusing to let him fall. And then, the sword blazed, unleashing a shockwave that hurled the warlord back. Kale roared, driving the blade forward, piercing through the crimson armor. The warlord collapsed, his spear clattering to the ground. The rebels cheered. The hunters retreated. The chamber was safe, for now. But Kale stood shaking, his heart heavy. If Malvek could command warlords like this, then the galaxy was already slipping from his grasp. Later, when the fires were out and the rebels tended to their wounded, Captain Saren approached Kyle. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. "Malvek is moving faster than we thought. He's already crowned himself emperor." Kale clenched his jaw. "But he's not the emperor. He can't be. The sword chose me." Saren studied him for a long moment. "Then prove it. Rally the people. Show them the real heir still lives. Because if you don't, Malvek will rule before you even draw your first breath as emperor." Her words cut deep. Kyle didn't want a throne, but he couldn't deny the truth. If he didn't fight, Malvek would enslave them all. And so, reluctantly, Kyle nodded. "Then we fight." Far above, Malvek watched reports from the battle. His warlord was dead. His hunters defeated, but Malvek only laughed. "Good," he murmured. "Let him rise. Let him believe he is strong. The higher he climbs, the harder he will fall." His generals knelt in silence, none daring to meet his eyes. Malvek raised his crimson blade, its edge glowing with the fire of stolen power. "The galaxy will not follow a boy with a rusty sword. They will follow strength, and I will give them a storm." The galaxy now stood divided. Some whispered of the heir with the sword of ashen flame, the boy who defied hunters and warlords. Others bowed to Malvek, believing his lies, fearing his power. And Kale, standing in the shadows of an empire reborn, realized the terrible truth. This was no longer about survival, it was about war. The Great War, the galaxy was burning. World after world fell to Malvek's crimson banners. Cities once free were crushed under iron rule, their skies filled with his warships, their people forced to kneel to a false throne. His armies spread like fire, devouring everything, but rumors spread faster than fear. Whispers of a boy, a sword, a forgotten bloodline, a true heir who had risen from the dust with a weapon older than time. The galaxy stood at a crossroads, and Kale was at the center of it. Deep in the underground city of rebels, Kale stood before a gathering of soldiers, mercenaries, and refugees. Captain Saren's voice carried through the chamber. "This is Kale. He carries the sword of ashen flame. He is the blood of the true emperor, and he will lead us," the crowd murmured, some in awe, others in doubt. Kale shifted uncomfortably. the sword heavy at his side. He was no leader. He was a scavenger, a boy who once dug through ruins for scraps. But when he lifted the sword, silence fell. Its glow lit the chamber, warm and alive. The people leaned forward, their fear fading into hope. Kyle swallowed hard. His voice was quiet, uncertain at first. I don't want a throne. I don't want to be emperor. But Malvek will not stop. He will not rest until he rules every world, until no voice is free. I can't fight him alone. But together, we can. The chamber erupted in shouts and cheers. Soldiers slammed their fists against their chests. For the first time, Kale saw it. Belief. Not in him, perhaps, but in the sword, in the idea of something greater than fear. And so, the war began. The rebels became more than survivors. They became an army. Ships long buried were repaired, engines roaring back to life. Rusted weapons were reforged. Hidden bases flickered with light as soldiers trained, as pilots drilled in the dark. Across the stars, more joined them. Deserters, from Malvek's legions, smugglers tired of tyranny, entire villages rising to fight. Kyle trained alongside them. The sword showed him more each day. Shields of light that could block entire volleys. Waves of fire that could scatter armies. Even visions of battles yet to come. But each new power came with pain. Nights filled with burning dreams. Memories not his own. He saw emperors long dead. Battles long past. Voices whispering, warning. Sometimes the sword's glow frightened him. It was not just a weapon, it was alive. And Kale began to wonder, did he wield the sword? Or did the sword wield him? The first great battle came at the world of Aramis. A desert planet rich with resources, Aramis had been enslaved by Malvek's warlords. Mines stretched across its sands where men, women, and children toiled under brutal guards. Malvek's banners flew from the spires of its capital. Kale's fleet arrived under the cover of night. Dozens of ships patched together from scraps and smuggler hulls descended through the skies. Rebels cheered, their voices echoing in the eye. Comms. This is for Aramis. The hunters were waiting. Crimson warships rose from the dunes, their cannons blazing. The sky erupted in fire. Kyle stood on the bridge of a rebel cruiser, the sword at his side, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Explosions lit the darkness. Ships collided, beams slicing across the heavens. The rebels fought bravely, but Malvek's forces were strong, disciplined, endless. When the battle turned grim, Kale stepped forward. He raised the sword, and its light burst across the sky. Every rebel ship felt it. Every heart burned brighter, and when Kale boarded the capital ship, sword blazing, the tide shifted. He cut through corridors filled with hunters, sparks showering as steel clashed against plasma. Darren fought at his side, fierce and unyielding, covering Kale's back. The rebels stormed the decks, freeing prisoners, toppling war banners. Finally, Kale reached the command chamber. The warlord of Aramis stood there, towering, his armor scarlet, his voice a thunderclap. The false heir dares step into my halls? Kale's chest burned. Not false, not heir, just someone who won't kneel. The duel shook the ship. Sparks and fire, steel against plasma. The warlord's strength was monstrous, but Kale's resolve was stronger. The sword flared brighter, brighter, until at last Kale drove it through. The warlord's chest. The tyrant fell. The people of Aramis rose, the mines were broken, the banners burned, and the galaxy whispered louder. The true heir fights. But victory came with a cost. That night, Kale stood alone, staring at the stars. His body ached, his hands shook. He had killed again, and again, and again. And though the rebels celebrated, cheering his name, Kale's heart was heavy. Darren approached quietly. You saved them, don't torture yourself for it. Kale didn't answer. He looked down at the sword, its glow softer now, almost gentle. Every time I fight, I feel it pulling me deeper, like it wants more blood, more power. What if one day I can't stop? Darren put a hand on his shoulder. Then I'll stop you. Brother, you're not alone. Kale nodded, but the doubt remained. Far across the stars, in the crimson halls of Malvek's throne, the false emperor seethed. Reports of Aramis's fall filled his ears. His warlord, dead. His mines, lost. His empire shaken. But Malvek did not rage. He smiled. "Good," he whispered. "Let him win battles. Let him gather followers. Every victory ties him tighter to the blade. Every life he takes, the sword drinks deeper. Soon, it will consume him." His generals shifted uneasily, but none dared speak. Malvek raised his own blade, forged in blood and shadow. "And when the boy has built his empire, I will burn it. I will burn him." The war spread. Rebel fleets struck Malvek's outposts. Kyle led raids on supply lines, freed prisoners from camps, toppled tyrants from thrones. The people rallied, their voices rising like thunder across the stars. For the first time in generations, hope bloomed. But Malvek struck back. Worlds that supported Kale were burned, their cities reduced to ash. Villages that whispered his name were slaughtered. Children were taken, soldiers executed, banners raised in blood. Every victory cost Kale something. Every triumph left scars, and in the shadows the sword grew heavier. The breaking point came at the siege of Korath. Korath was a world of oceans, its cities floating on massive metal platforms. The rebels believed it safe, hidden, untouchable. But Malvek's fleet arrived in silence, blockading the skies, cutting off every escape. The battle lasted 3 days. The seas burned, platforms collapsed into the waves, ships sank screaming into the abyss. Kyle fought on the front lines, the sword blazing brighter than ever before, carving through hunters and warlords alike. But the cost was unimaginable. Thousands died. Entire fleets were lost. When dawn broke on the 4th day, Kyle stood on the shore of a shattered city. Bodies floated in the water. Smoke blackened the sky. The rebels had won, but it felt like defeat. Kale fell to his knees, the sword slipping from his hand. "How many more must die because of me?" he whispered. Captain Saren's voice was hard, unyielding. "They died because of Malvek. Not you. If you stop now, everything they gave will be for nothing." Kyle closed his eyes. The sword pulsed faintly, almost like it was listening, almost like it was feeding. He wondered just for a moment if Malvek was right, if the sword would one day consume him. Far above, in his crimson throne, Malvek watched the flames of Korath. His laughter echoed across the halls. "The war has begun," he said, "and soon, the boy will learn that every emperor bleeds." The emperor's choice. The galaxy was burning. Kale had seen too many battles, too many dead. His sword, the sword of ashen flame, glowed heavier now, not just with light, but with memory. Every strike it had delivered, every life it had taken, weighed on him. He had freed worlds, yes, but every victory left ruins, every triumph carried blood. And now the war had come to its final hour. Malvek, the false emperor, had summoned him. A message broadcast across the stars. "Come to the throne of ash. Come, with your sword. Or watch the galaxy fall." Kyle had no choice. Kyle's fleet gathered above the shattered skies of Korath. Thousands of ships, rebels, deserters, smugglers, villagers with nothing left but rage. They stood ready to follow him, ready to die if he asked. But Kale stood on the bridge of his flagship, silent. The sword pulsed in his hand, alive with fire. Darren stood beside him, grim but loyal, Captain Saren at his back. "This is it," Saren said quietly. "One battle, one throne. If you win, the galaxy is free. If you fall—" Kyle finished the sentence. "Then the galaxy belongs to Malvek." He looked at his reflection in the glass, at the boy who once scavenged scraps from the ruins. That boy was gone. What remained was something else. Not yet emperor, not yet legend, but no longer no one. He lifted the sword and his fleet roared, "To the throne." The throne of ash was not just a palace. It was a fortress carved into a dead world, its towers blackened by fire, its sky filled with storm clouds that never moved. Malvek's fleet waited above it, crimson warships, endless and vast. His armies filled the surface, hunters lined the walls. The rebels struck like lightning. The sky erupted in fire. Ships clashed, fleets tore each other apart. Blazing plasma beams cut through the void, explosions lit the heavens. Kale's flagship shook with every impact, but still it pressed forward, cutting a path through Malvek's defenses. On the ground, armies collided, hunters in black armor against rebels who had nothing but courage and hope. Blades clashed, rifles blazed. The earth itself shook with the weight of the war. Kyle fought at the front, the sword burning brighter than ever, cutting through ranks of hunters, turning aside blasts of fire. Darren fought beside him, fierce and unyielding. Saren commanded the lines, her voice carrying through the storm. But the battle was endless. For every hunter they struck down, more rose. For every ship they destroyed, another arrived. And then, the storm clouds above split open. Malvek descended. He came not as a man, but as a storm. His crimson armor glowed with stolen power. His blade, forged from shadow and blood, burned with darkness. He stood tall above the battlefield, his voice thundering across the world. "Behold your emperor!" the hunters roared. The rebels faltered. Even the sky itself seemed to bend beneath his presence. Kyle stepped forward, the sword of flame in his grip. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the storm. "You are no emperor." Malvek's helmet tilted, his smile sharp and cruel. "And you are no savior. You are just a boy carrying a curse." The two swords clashed. It was not a fight. It was a storm, made flesh. Kyle and Malvek's blades collided, light against shadow, fire against blood. The ground split, the skies, cracked shockwaves tore through armies. Soldiers on both sides staggered as the force of the duel rippled across the battlefield. Malvek was strong, far stronger than any warlord Kale had faced. His strikes were heavy, merciless, his blade dripping with corruption. Every blow threatened to shatter Kyle's bones, to tear the sword from his hands, but Kyle stood firm. The sword guided him, each strike faster, sharper, fueled not by rage but by resolve. Sparks flew, flames roared, and still neither man fell. "You cannot win," Malvek snarled. "Every life you take, the sword feeds. Every victory it grows, heavier. Soon it will consume you, and then you will be just like me." Kyle's chest burned. The sword pulsed, alive with fire, whispering voices of dead emperors, of power and blood. For a moment he saw it, himself on the throne, the galaxy kneeling, the sword blazing like a sun, and he was afraid. The duel raged into the heart of the throne of ash, into the great hall where banners of crimson hung from the walls. Soldiers did not follow. None dared enter. Kyle and Malvek clashed before the silver throne itself, each strike shaking the hall. At last Malvek drove Kale to his knees, his blade pressing down. His voice was a growl. "You will break. And when you do, the sword will be mine. The galaxy will be mine." Kale's arms trembled, his strength failing. The sword pulsed in his hand, fire blazing, power pouring into him. He could feel it. Endless power. Enough to burn Malvek to ash. Enough to end this war in a single strike. But he remembered the old woman's words. Destiny does not ask what you want. It asks what you will do. And he understood. The sword was not a gift. It was a test. Kale let go. The sword clattered to the floor, its glow fading. Malvek froze, shocked. "What are you doing?" Kale rose slowly, his eyes steady. "I won't be your mirror. I won't be consumed." Malvek snarled, raising his blade. "Then you will die." But in that moment, the sword of ashen flame blazed brighter than ever before. It rose from the ground on its own, spinning through the air. Light poured from it, fire and lightning burning the banners, shaking the hall. It flew into Cale's hand again, but now it was different. Not heavy, not consuming. Balanced. Alive, because Cale had chosen. Not power, not the throne, but freedom. With a single strike, he cut through Malvek's blade. With a second, he cut through Malvek himself. The false emperor fell. When Malvek's body struck the ground, silence filled the hall. The hunters outside faltered. Their leader was dead. The crimson banners burned, the storm clouds split, and sunlight poured through the skies of the Ash world for the first time in centuries. The rebels roared in victory. Across the galaxy, the message spread. The false emperor is dead. The true heir lives. But Cale did not sit on the throne. He turned, his back on it. In the days that followed, Cale spoke to the galaxy. His voice was carried across stars, his words simple, unyielding. I am no emperor. No one should rule the galaxy by fear or by blood. The sword is not a crown. It is a burden, and it is one I now lay down. He lifted the sword of ashen flame, one last time. It blazed with fire brighter than any sun, then broke apart into light scattering into the sky. The people gasped. The weapon of emperors gone forever. Cale looked at them, his voice steady. The galaxy belongs to you, not to me. Not to any emperor. To you. And with that, he walked away. Years later, the galaxy still whispered of him. The scavenger who became a legend. The boy who carried the sword. The heir who refused the throne. Some called him coward. Some called him savior. But most called him what he truly was. The last emperor who chose not to rule. And in the ruins of the throne of ash, where the banners once burned, the wind still carried a faint echo. The echo of a sword's heartbeat. Waiting. Always waiting.